A seemingly ordinary day cleaning the fireplace led Michelle into a spiral of hidden truths and betrayals. When she uncovered burnt letters addressed to her, she unraveled a dark secret about her husband that shattered her perfect world and changed her life forever. I remember the first time I met Mike like it was yesterday. We were at a mutual friend's barbecue, and he spilled ketchup on my dress. I laughed it off, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. Fast forward 6 years, and here we are, living in our cozy little house with our 3-year-old son, Luke. Mike and I have always been open with each other, or at least that's what I thought. "Hey babe," Mike said one evening as he walked into the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. "Do you need any help with that?" I smiled, shaking my head. "No, I've got it. But you can set the table if you want." Mike chuckled, grabbing the plates. "You know, I don't mind helping out more. You do so much already." "I know you would, but I like having a bit of control in the kitchen," I teased. Luke ran into the kitchen, clutching his favorite toy truck. "Mommy. Daddy. Look." "Wow, that's a cool truck," Mike said, lifting him up. "Did you play with it all day?" "Yeah," Luke exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. "Can we play after dinner?" "Of course," Mike replied, ruffling Luke's hair. Our life was perfect, or at least it seemed to be. I'm Michelle, and this is the story of how I discovered a life-changing truth about my husband. One weekend, while Mike took Luke to the park, I decided to clean the fireplace in our living room. It was a mundane task, but it needed to be done. As I scooped out the ash, I noticed something odd, a half-burnt piece of paper with a postage stamp on it. Curiosity got the better of me. I sifted through the ashes and found another fragment with someone's handwriting on it. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the words, "Dear Michelle." What on earth? I thought. Why would Mike burn my letters? I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. After cleaning up, I went straight to our bedroom and started searching through Mike's closet. I felt a pang of guilt but pushed it aside. My hands trembled as I rummaged through his things until I found an open envelope hidden under his clothes, with the same stamp I saw on the burnt paper. I opened the envelope and began reading the letter inside. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the handwriting. It was from Steve, my high school sweetheart and Mike's best friend. Steve, who had disappeared without a trace years ago. The letter read, "Dear Michelle, I don't know how to tell you this, but I am very sorry that this happened 10 years ago. I just wanted to save my mother. You wrote that you don't want to see me and you don't love me anymore. Maybe we could at least meet for 10 minutes? I will explain everything to you in more detail. Mike is involved in the fact that I disappeared." My mind was reeling. Mike was involved in Steve's disappearance? My husband had been hiding this from me all these years? Just then I heard the front door open. I quickly stuffed the letter back into the envelope and hid it under Mike's clothes. "Hey love, we're back," Mike called out. I took a deep breath and forced a smile as I walked out to greet them. "Hey, how was the park?" "It was great," Luke said, running up to me. "We saw ducks." "That's wonderful, sweetie," I said, hugging him tightly. I looked up at Mike, who was smiling, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. That night, as Mike slept soundly beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter. Why had Mike done this? What had really happened between him and Steve? I had to find out. The next morning, I waited until Mike left for work. I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed answers first. So I took the letter and the envelope and got into my car. The address Steve had written was still legible. I had to see him, to hear his side of the story. As I drove, my mind raced with questions. What if Steve was lying? What if Mike had a good reason for what he did? But deep down, I knew I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I pulled up to the address, my heart pounding in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I got out of the car and walked up to the door. With a shaky hand, I knocked, praying that Steve would answer, and that I would finally get the answers I so desperately needed. The wait felt like an eternity, and I was on the verge of turning back when the door creaked open. Steve stood there, looking as surprised to see me as I was to see him. Michelle, his voice was filled with shock and confusion. "Hi, Steve. Can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded and stepped aside to let me in. The house was modest but cozy, with photos of his family scattered around. He led me to the living room, and we sat on the worn-out couch. "Why now, Steve? Why did you reach out after all these years?" I asked, my emotions boiling over. Steve took a deep breath, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't want to disappear, Michelle. My mom. She was really sick. I needed money for her surgery, and Mike offered to help." "Mike?" "My husband, Mike." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Yes, your husband," Steve continued. "But there was a catch. He said he'd only help if I left you and disappeared from your life." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. Why would he do that? "He wanted you for himself, Michelle. He knew I'd do anything for my mom, so I took the deal. I saved her, but I lost you." Steve's voice broke, and I could see the pain in his eyes. "And the letters?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You wrote to me." "I did," he nodded. "But the responses I got were harsh. They said you didn't want to see me or hear from me ever again. I thought you hated me." I felt a lump in my throat. "Steve, I never wrote those letters. Mike must have answered them, pretending to be me." Steve's eyes widened in realization. He did that to keep us apart. Tears welled up in my eyes as the weight of Mike's betrayal hit me. I trusted him, Steve. I never thought he could do something so cruel. Steve reached out and took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Michelle. If I had known." We sat in silence, the reality of Mike's actions sinking in. "I can't stay with him," I finally said. "Not after knowing what he did. But I don't know if I can be with you either." Steve nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I never meant to complicate things for you. I just wanted to explain and maybe find some closure." "I appreciate that," I said softly. "But it's so much to process. Mike's not who I thought he was, and everything feels like a lie." We talked for hours, going over the past and what could have been. By the time I left, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I knew what I had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. When I got home, Mike was waiting for me. "Where were you?" he asked, concern masking his true nature. "I went to see Steve," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Mike's face went pale. "Michelle, I can explain." "Don't bother," I interrupted. "I know everything. The money, the letters, all of it." He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "How could you, Mike? How could you manipulate us like that?" "Michelle, I did it for us," he pleaded. "I loved you too much to lose you." "That's not love, Mike. That's control. You destroyed Steve's life and lied to me for years. I can't stay with you." Tears streamed down his face as he realized the gravity of his actions. "Please, don't do this." But my mind was made up. I can't keep living a lie, Mike. I want a divorce. The days that followed were a blur. I filed for divorce and Mike moved out. Luke was too young to understand, but I did my best to keep his life as normal as possible. I felt like I was in a daze, torn between the love I once had for Mike and the betrayal that shattered it. One afternoon, Steve called. "Hey, Michelle, how are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied. "It's just hard." "I know. If you ever need to talk or just get away, I'm here." "Thanks, Steve. That means a lot." As I tucked Luke into bed that evening, he looked up at me with his innocent eyes. "Mommy, are you okay?" I smiled, trying to hide my inner turmoil. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a lot on my mind." "Will Daddy come home?" I kissed his forehead, my heart aching. I don't know, Luke. But whatever happens, we'll be okay. As the weeks passed, I found myself questioning everything. Was leaving Mike the right decision? Could I ever trust again? And what about Steve? Could we ever have a future together after everything that happened?